the trauma. Is it afternoon already? Good morning, good afternoon. I feel humbled when I hear the work that you guys do, and we are really privileged to have a lot of resources available. I stand here in humility. I stand here not as the expert, but I stand here sharing my heart, sharing the hearts and the wounds of children that I have the privilege of working with, and also hoping to just maybe change an idea, a thought, or just even a connection that you have with yourself and your own wounding and your own childhood that would equip you to go back into the fields where you work. Linky, as I know her, the lady with the black dress, Helene, as she was formally introduced, we are colleagues, but we're also very close friends. She's like a sister to me, and we sing in a chamber choir. And every Wednesday, we go in the combi, and we 5 girls, ladies, women, old tannies, going to Stellenbosch. And then we talk. We talk about everything. We talk about our work. And the one day I shared something about the tea lady that works with us in the building that I work. And her son contacted her, and he contacted me and said he wants to come and see me. And he, at that stage, was 24 years old. That was last year. And he has a drug and alcohol problem, tic, as you know it here, and marijuana, and also alcohol problem. But she's a single mother. And he came and he sat with his head in his hands, and he said to me, "Auntie, I need a father. I need a role model." And my heart breaks even now as I say it. And we started talking about that in the car. That was one of the conversations on the way to the choir. And there was another friend of ours that's a social worker, and we said, we have a heart to give fathers back to our communities and to our children. And I've tried various ways. I've tried to connect with people to take this boy under their wing. And it was just close ends. And when I sat there this morning and I looked up and I saw this, and I said, be careful what we ask for. And I am really hopeful to be able to be part of support and helping to develop this also in our South African context. So thank you for the privilege of being able to share some of my experience with you. The one thing I want to say to you as counselors, pastors, fathers, is you have got what it takes. You've got a pair of eyes, you've got ears, you've got a mouth, you've got hands, you've got legs. That's what you need in order to be able to be attuned, mirrored, connect with anyone else. So if all fails, go back to basics. And I'm not going to focus on all the differences between the cultures because I have no clue. I really have no clue. But what I do know is we have a lot of commonalities. We have a basic human need, all of us, to be loved, to be seen, to be noticed, to be safe. And we can work on those commonalities. We have a heart for people, and that we can work with. So remember, you have what it takes. So if all fails, just look someone deep in the eye and see what it makes, what it changes inside what you feel and also in the other person. Because a lot of neurological processes takes place. And for the dads, also know that we all have an innate ability to parent, and especially, and I speak to God a lot about this by saying there's so much pain, there's so much trauma, but how, what, where, and when you feel overwhelmed, you just know that He's also given us some hopeful aspects. In each of us, there's ability to parent ourselves. But what we need are people like you to be able to bring it out. So just by noticing someone, just by caring, just by looking, just by listening, just by touching, you already make a difference. And something else that I think of, some of the other questions that have been posted, just to get that off my mind now, is with discipline. The basics for discipline is connection. It's like the bridge. If there's no bridge, you can't move from the one side to the other side. You on this side, the child's on that side. So connect, get to know your child, get to understand your child, and then discipline is a much more easy concept and practical thing when the bridge is already there. Okay, I named my talk The Drama of Being a Child within our current context because it is a drama. And the other thing that you are all equipped with, and I spoke to a small group earlier this morning, is that each of us, and you also mentioned it, each of us have experience of being a child. And some of it was really good and warm and kind, but some of it was also not the same. And if all fails, you are all sitting here, so you have survived. You have come out and survived childhood like all of us. Not without being wounded, but that's a lot of good experience to go back on without having any knowledge, any resources. Go back inside and think, if you have a 6-year-old or a 5-year-old or a 3-year-old, what does the world look like through the eyes of a 6-year-old? All these adults, these giants, they tell you what to do, when to sleep, when to eat, when to poo, how to do it. And once you can just understand that, you can adjust your way of interacting with a child. So if you want to understand children, go back into being what it felt like to be a child, to not be heard, to not be seen, to not feel empowered. So regardless of resources, remember you've got what you need. Okay, you've got what is available. Okay, just a brief introduction to who I am, what I do, where I come from. I'm the mother of 2, and that has been the most humbling experience of my life. And I think Ansi wrote a book, and I always quote out of her book when she said, parenting is like a 4x4 trip. Just the one moment when you think, yeah, I got it, I'm here on the top. Then the next moment you go through the valley of desolation by just being humbled, working with children and being a parent. I'm also a psychologist. I'm working in a private practice in Paarl. And my community service is what I'm doing now, is also seeing some of my clients on a pro bono basis where I see them for free. I also am a supervisor for student psychologists that work in the community. And then I'm a sun play therapist, and that's where all the toys come in. So sun play therapy is just another way of reaching the inner world of the child. Okay, so I've got 2 sandboxes in my room, and then I've got 3 walls filled with little miniature toys. So little stones and everything everybody throws out, I gather. Wherever I go, you gather toys, because toys and playing is the universal language of people, of children and of people. I also use other methods. We work with clay, we work with music, but not in the same way as the therapists. So it's just part of the background. Sometimes we'll do songs, sometimes we'll do like a rap song or something, to try and beat some angry monster or something. So it just happens. We also work with paint, and then sometimes the blah, 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 talking. It's also part of the therapy. But lots of times with children, they don't know what's wrong with them. As with these children, sometimes things happen in such early times, they cannot tell you that they've had early developmental wounding. That means like as you explained this morning, lots of intrusive needles and stuff, and you're a little baby, you've got no clue. You just see bright lights when your eyes are not ready for light. You just feel all the needles. You don't have a say. So those are the images that the child buries in his body and in the unconscious. And through therapy, we bring it out and help it heal. So the focus is on childhood intervention. And one thing you guys must know, and ladies, is that problems are a normal part of growing up. All you know. And you posed the question regarding keeping children safe. We cannot. That's one of the most disappointing things that I as a parent had to learn. We cannot keep our children safe all the time, but we have to try and also help them to show the dangers. So instead of them not letting them climb a tree, you say, wow, look how high you can go, but watch where you're standing. Pick the thick branch. Hold on, I must be there. So you put in safety measures and not keeping away. And that's an important thing, is not keep away, because we do want to grow up resilient children. I don't have to explain a lot about what causes problems. I'm just going to give you an overview of what I have worked with the past year and a half, to give you an example of what our children, what the drama of being a child in South African context is like. I've worked with 5 cases of parental suicide, where fathers hung themselves, shot themselves. I've worked with murder cases where the father murdered someone and then killed himself afterwards. The farm murders, I've worked with the families of the farm murders that take place in our community. Children that lose parents to cancer. I have also had one family where I worked with 2 little girls. The dad died suddenly of a heart attack. Divorce. The other one was also quite a severe case where the father, but there were lots of other dysfunctionalities involved, and the father was killed in a motor car accident early in the morning, but then he was killed with his girlfriend, and he was also married. So you know what children have to deal with. And then early developmental trauma, I see that often where there was birth trauma, when there's physical disabilities, the normal anxiety-related depression, attachment, separation anxiety, sexual trauma, sexual abuse, bullying, lots of stomach aches, headaches. I once saw a little boy that had I'm forgetting the name. It's migraine of the stomach. I've never heard of it before, but until I saw once in a session, we had all the symptoms of a normal migraine, but it was a stomach migraine. So the bodies tell us what the child cannot tell in words. Selective mutism, that's a form where the children don't speak, but they can speak. They have language. They will speak la 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 with their parents or their friends or their siblings, and when I come out, they go. So I have the oldest child that I have at the moment with selective mutism is a little girl, not a little girl, she's 12 years old. So it's been a pattern of coping that is not really helpful because she's very intelligent, but now it's impacting on her functioning in all her levels. And then lots of parenting problems because most parents are actually wounded children inside. Okay. Right, just a few red flags. When would it be necessary to take your child to see someone? Usually when something changes. So your once happy child becomes sullen, angry, withdrawn, quiet, not playing. When the daily functioning cannot go to school, doesn't want to go to school, has difficulty concentrating. And then the second thing that you have to look at is what are the nature of the problems? What happened? So is there divorce? Is there death? Did the child see any trauma? Did the friend lose a pet? Did someone move away? Whatever the circumstances, those are also important aspects to look at. And then never forget medical procedures and medical problems. Children with diabetes, it's like living with major loss. I'm seeing a little boy now who is 8 years old, and he was diagnosed with Duchenne muscular dystrophy. And that is the developmental or the age. I'm thinking in Afrikaans and translating, so that's when I get lost in translation. The expected age that they get is about 35 at the most. Some die earlier, but it's really hard for parents, and it's hard for the boy being in a body that actually disappoints you most of the time. Okay, so what the therapy does, what therapy is about. Therapy is try and, what's that word again? To rescript, but in a different environment. Because the wounding takes place in relationships. It takes place in relationships where people are wounded. And then the therapy is a safe and protected space where the healing can take place. So the relationship in therapy is actually the most important aspect. We also try and support children with coping skills, lot of parent guidance. In the way that I work a lot with the parents to also bring their own wounded children into the session, and then also rewrite their parenting scripts that I'm hoping you guys would, regardless of how you've been brought up, what your culture has been learning or teaching you, what you have been fed, is to be open to see what is working, what is helpful, and what not, and be open to take away a few new ideas. Okay. I was asked to do a few case examples, to share some information with you regarding what therapy is about, to demonstrate how that works. The first example that is most vivid in my mind is a little boy I recently started working with. He's an 8-year boy, and he is in the children's home. He has had multiple abuse, neglect, abandonment issues. He was born in a different country. He was brought to South Africa, never had contact, so he doesn't have a father. And now he doesn't have a mother either, because the mother is lost to drugs and prostitution and not healthy lifestyle. So he's been taken away. And I saw him 2 days ago, and he came in, and he always comes in with a pain. So then I said, "How are you?" And he said, his neck is sore. And I said, "Okay, but let's look at the neck." And with the whole touching thing, it's, especially with abused children, it's a difficult thing, but he craves physical contact. So in my attunement with him, I try and within the boundaries, ethical boundaries of the work, try and be with him. And he was lying on the floor on his stomach. And then I just do a few like deep muscle only on the back. And he lifted his head up and he said, "Why do I have so much pain?" And my heart just broke, because he is suffering. And I said to him, it looks like it's too much to bear. And we then started speaking about sadness. And I asked him, "Do you feel sad?" And he looked at me and he said, "No, I am sad." And that was what his body was trying to explain. He said, "Because I'm out of my mother, I am so alone." So when you hear that, it really breaks your heart. But then comes in, what can I do? I can either go into the helplessness, or I can really say, how can I give this boy a sense of feeling loved, feeling accepted? And I have a little play monkey. And I said, "But I think there's someone that wants to go home with him." And I said, every time this loneliness comes, you hug the monkey. And he walked out there for the next 20 minutes. He didn't lift his arm so that the monkey could move. It's just something simple. for you to remember. It's just giving them a transitional object that can carry the message of you are not alone. Just something simple. And just this case also of severe neglect. She was a 2-year-old girl that in Paarl was found next to the railway line, busy eating sand. And I have a picture, but because I didn't ask the parents for permission to use the pictures, I couldn't show the picture. But she had a picture of a little baby sitting in the sand and no one around. And you could just sense, sometimes looking at the images, you could sense the loneliness. Okay, here's one case example. Now you can see at the back my shelves of the 1,000 of toys that you can see there. And it's so amazing. People always ask me, there's so many toys, don't the children get overwhelmed? But they don't. It's as if they really go into their inner world and they pick and they choose whatever they need to work with. This is the case example of a child whose parents are going through a divorce. But as you can just see how his two worlds have been fairly chaotic, because this is what you see, it's chaotic. It's animals from sea and from the wild and from air and everywhere just all mixed up, and there's just no space, and it's the two worlds, and sometimes they migrate from the one world to the other world, and you can see that movement in the sand trays. This is a case example. I don't know if you can see right in the center of this little stone building is a metal figure sitting like this. But this is an example of a 34-year-old woman who lost her mother when she was a child. But then the father just couldn't cope with his own bereavement and grief, and he also deserted the children. So she had to parent herself from a very young age. And she is deeply, deeply wounded. But you can see how deep in this hole of depression she really is, and how difficult it is for her to break out of it. That's a picture a few weeks later of the same person. It's also a wooden carved figure of someone sitting in this position, just feeling overwhelmed by their own emotions, but also by life, and trying to regain a sense of control and some order. This is a 4-year-old girl, more a normal, not pathological case, but also seen as a problem when children aren't allowed to be children. Very organized, and you don't feel, and girls don't get angry. And there's this waterfall, and I missed it in the session, and when I unpacked, that was after a whole series of trays. The butterfly, the hope for transformation, finding herself, finding her soul, is what was hidden behind the waterfall in the cave. So the same waterfall was used with a child that was in a cross-cultural adoption that we have in South Africa, where parents from different races and languages and cultures adopt from other cultures. And she was a Xhosa girl that was adopted by a mother from England and a father from South Africa. And she is suffering from bipolar depression. And once you understand the environment, you can see why her inside has also been torn apart by two different worlds, and also how she played it out. But that little girl was hiding in the cave. This is the picture of a boy who is, I think he is 9 years now. He hasn't spoken. He has selective mutism, but he's also on the autistic spectrum. But a wonderful family and a wonderful process. So he's talking. He's doing orals. He's standing on the stage at school, but that was after 2 years of therapy. But there you can see, let me just go back. you can see the barriers. Don't enter, don't come close, don't come in, that he built without saying a word. A picture paints 1,000 words. But you can also see there's some tools, there's some working taking place, there's some energy, new energies. There's a digger loader coming to take all those barriers away, and it did its work.
Ilana, sorry, I'm going to just interrupt with a question. What is your instruction? Construct your world. What do you say to them before they pick and do all these things?
Okay, so when they come in, I just say that, year in year, you can play in any way that you choose. You can either build a world in the sand or make a picture in the sand. They've got a wet and a dry sand tray. Or you can make a picture, you can make something out of clay. So I have all the different places where they can involve. And I just see what appeals to them. So if they want to work in the sand, they just build a world. And then I usually will make some comments. I will, for instance, say, this person must be really scared, because there's lots of boundaries that help to make him feel safe. But now then I would also comment by saying something like, but when there are so many barriers, it also makes it hard for him to get to the other side or for other people to get in. So you just comment on what you see, you don't interpret. Does that answer your question? So the general instruction is just build a world in the sand or do a painting, and then I ask them, do you want me to tell you or do you want to choose? And usually they choose their own. They know. They just bring this, what's inside, they bring it out. This was part of a sand tray of a little boy who just recently lost his mother to cancer. And he built this world, and this was hidden behind a bush. And he said, do you have a gravestone that says rest in peace? And I gave him the little gravestone, and then he said, because there lies the mummy. So mummy as in mummy, but actually there lies my mommy. So you have to listen to what children are saying. This is a teenage boy. Also, the parents wanted him to come. He was, this rubbish and blah, blah, blah. And I said, you don't have to talk a word. Let your hands do the talking. And he did the most wonderful work. He came in because he self-mutilated, cutting himself. So you can see the cuts in the sand. And that was his last sand tray, and that was his process, no words. Okay, and there's the little incubator that you can see. And this was the boy that I spoke about that was born 27 weeks. And actually, he was supposed to die, but he lived and he survived. And I get goosebumps when I still think of it, but there you can just see how wounded he really is and how he's playing out the woundedness, how he got hurt. And also he had a very authoritarian father that wanted him to perform and be the sports star. And he just didn't have the abilities. Scholastically, he was struggling. And later on, we found out he had a hearing problem. He had learning difficulties. So there are lots of difficulties that that poor boy, and he was showing us here, but also going back and giving the baby in the incubator and the boys in the hospital the care that they needed. This was his world. A few months later, as you can see, all the nurturants helped him grow up. Here he's doing a braai, and there are lots of animals, and there's inside and outside, and there's food for the animals. So it's a very healthy picture that you can see here. This was one of the children whose fathers committed suicide. She was one of twins. And this, you can just see the trauma and the death and the destruction that resulted from that. We had to bury and unbury, bury and unbury in the sand the whole session. That's what we did. Okay, that's it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Elana.